Welcome to the Pre-Pod. I'm here with my very special guest, my mom, Tracy
Hi.
Edwards. She is a teacher and my mom.
That's right.
Welcome to the Pre-Pod officially as a guest.
Yay. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for making me. Um,
You're welcome.
so I would love for you to share a little bit of a background about yourself.
About myself.
Yes.
Okay. So we're talking career things or what?
Just give them a little mixture, a little profile.
A little profile. Okay. Well, I, like you, am from a very rural part of New York State, which makes it fun when you talk to people and you tell them you're from New York. I know you've experienced this and like, oh yeah, really, I love New York, Times Square. And you're like, no, cows. So I can see Canada from my house, as you know. And when I grew up, my grandmother had a camp and it was across the border, and we'd go over to Canada in the summer. And that was my favorite place growing up. We would be at camp and all of my cousins would be there. And it was like my extended family. It was like I had older brothers and sisters because my cousins were older than me, which was nice because I'm the oldest. Um, through the virtue of blended families, I am the oldest of 8. There were 9 of us. So I've got a very large family. Growing up, I did. And so it was nice to not be the oldest and not be in charge when I was at camp. That was kind of cool. That was Cousin Sally's job. So thank you, Cousin Sally. And let's see. And I went to high school here. I did all of the stuff that, you do in rural towns. And then I went to college. And when I was in college, I was a freshman, almost sophomore, when I got pregnant with you and your brother. And I had twins and went back to college. I took a year off, but I was able to graduate on time. So it was like I didn't take any time off at all. I worked over the summers. And then it was hard finding a job. So we moved to Tennessee and I sold real estate, which is interesting because we haven't been in Tennessee in a long time, as you know. And your brother is currently looking for a house. Don't tell anyone that. Shh. And so he calls me up and he'll ask me questions. And I'm like, oh, I remember this from when I was a realtor. But let's see. Then we came back home and I got a job where I work now. And I've been there 22 years and I've been teaching. I've taught GED. I teach a lot of things. I've taught GED. I teach government and economics, mainly criminal justice, writing, public speaking. Once in a while, I look over online learning French class because I'm one of the few faculty members that can speak French enough to be able to read it at the really elementary French level. And I'm also on a school board and I'm on a history board and I'm an editor for a local history publication. And I do a lot of projects history-wise with my students. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Oh, and I'm single. I'm dating, but single.
You're dating but single.
Well, single in that I'm not married.
Okay. I was like, I think there's somebody in your life that'd be like, what did you just say? Yes.
Yes. I didn't
Okay.
say I was available.
Okay. I'm just clarifying it for him. So if he hears
Okay.
this episode, he knows.
He knows.
He's
Yeah, he does
not
watch.
dropped.
He does watch.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So sorry, for a moment there, my phone went off. I'm like, oh, I have to shut that off. So I wanted to ask you,
Mhm.
you said that you teach like a form of criminal justice.
Yes.
And as many of my followers know, I'm also paralegal, so they can kind of see where that love came from.
Mhm.
Um, but I know that your program was built either by you or for you in specific to you. Yes?
Mhm. Yes. Well, they gave me an idea and they said, we want you to take students, we want you to set up mentorships and things with lawyers and with different people in the government. And here's your classroom, go. So
That
yeah,
and that's been very successful. How many years have
it
you been doing
has. I've been doing that for about 12 years now. And it's really cool because I have really good students that I got to work with. So I certainly can't take all the credit for that. But what's really cool is hearing their stories now. And one of my students just last week finished his doctoral dissertation and he defended it. And now he has a doctorate in education. He has an EDD and he is looking for a job. He's been working the whole time. So he put himself through grad school and so that's really cool to hear. And he sent me a thank you note, which was super cool, and said that because I'd pushed him in his senior year and I taught him different things on research, that really helped him, not just to get through high school, but through college and grad school and a postdoctorate. So that's pretty cool. And I
That's
have students that have had really good success. And what's really cool about that is even though they've been successful on their own, certainly it's always nice to get the little note that says, you know what, I really appreciate what you did for me. So that's a cool thing. Because
yeah,
again, I didn't go to law school like a couple of my students have, and they've done it on their own, but it's still nice to get a thank you.
absolutely. I think teachers, as you know, I feel this way that teachers really do reserve. Wow. Most really good teachers deserve that respect and love because a lot of us learned from teachers. And I'm sure like those of you that are listening now have like that one teacher in your mind that you will never forget what they taught you and what you learned from them. So I think that's why it saddens me that like from a perspective of money, celebrities make more, but
Mhm.
teachers do a lot of work to help us. And some teachers have saved even kids' lives or
Yes.
teens' lives.
Well, that's the thing with COVID. I'm going to get to that in just a second. I just want to make sure that people know, even this is a brown bottle, this is a limeade. There is no alcohol. Since I'm being a teacher, I want to be a good model, a good role model. So I'm not drinking on your podcast, but there we go. So,
There we
and there's
go.
nothing in it except my blue recyclable straw,
Very
reusable.
good. Very
So
good.
that's one of the things though about COVID that I've really worked on, especially this year. And I'm also knitting. You will understand the significance, not so much of the colors. This is just going to be a dishcloth, but you know that this is one of the things I do to kind of keep myself grounded. And with COVID this year, as a teacher, it's been such a difficult year. Last year was tough. Last year in March, we all shut down and we went to remote teaching and they gave us about the same instruction, like, okay, here's your computer, go home and we'll see you sometime. We don't know when. And so, yeah, so that was fun. But this year it's been kind of like this combination of all of that. And so we had some remote time, but they didn't want us to be remote. The students had to be remote. So we had to go to school and teach from our computers, from our desks at school. And then we had in person, and then we were back to remote, and then back to in person, and then different classrooms throughout the building would be quarantined. But if my class didn't get in contact with that class, then we weren't quarantined. So my class, and I'm going to knock on wood because it's not over yet. So I've got my little wood right here. We were not quarantined this year. A couple of my students were, but as a group, we weren't quarantined. But what I decided to do this year, and you aren't going to be surprised about this at all, but you know how I love my celebrations and I celebrate everything. And I have, for all of the major holidays, I have a t-shirt, or I have like it was Cinco de Mayo this week. So I have a sombrero, and it was also May the 4th. So I have a tacos and Yoda t-shirt to kind of combine Cinco de Mayo and May the 4th. I have leggings for St. Patrick's Day and for Valentine's Day. Halloween is a big one. But this year, I would just have the students say, okay, well, this is, and I tried to do this before, but this year I did it every single week. We're going to find whatever National Day holiday is close enough to the Friday, and we're going to celebrate it. So there was popcorn day, there was taco day, which taco day isn't always on Cinco de Mayo, but there was chocolate chip cookie day, double chocolate chip cookie day, oatmeal cookie day. And so all of these things we celebrated, cheesecake day, and I could go through, I have it all in my teacher planner. And so I would, and in the years past, I'd have the students, like I would bring in something and have the kids help bring something in. But I realized this year that that may not be, I couldn't rely on them to do that, because what if one of them gets quarantined? So I've brought everything in. This week for Cinco de Mayo, I brought in tacos for everybody, and I brought them in for both morning and afternoon. And I brought in the salsa you and I made. And I
Ooh.
brought in the jalapeno peppers that I'd pickled afterwards with the leftover peppers that we had. And what's really cool about that is one of the students emailed me afterwards and she said, I'm sure this is a weird question, but could I get your recipe? Because I really like those peppers. And so, so that was cool. But I did that not because, not for anything else, but because of the mental health of it.
Yeah.
And so when I had my evaluation, the principal sat down with me, and one of the things he wrote for my strengths is that I create kind of a sense of family with my classroom, that's one of the things that was a strength for me. And I do that with having my celebrations. And we went around town and we put hearts on like the mayor's office. And then another teacher that had helped us, she has her own business and she teaches teachers. And so like a consultant kind of thing. And so we cut out all of these hearts, and some of the hearts we cut out, some of them I bought at the dollar store. Some of them I used my Cricut maker. Thank you very much for. And we called it heart attacking. And so we
Oh,
heart
that's cute.
attacked the principal, and we heart attacked the building trades teacher, and we heart attacked that consultant. We heart attacked the mayor. And it was just to get out there and get the kids to kind of see, the community a little bit differently. But it was also for them, because we couldn't go to court. Normally we would go and watch court and watch trials, but that was not allowed. So that was and one of the things we did in Veterans Day is we went around town. I would take them for mask breaks on walks in the fall when it was warmer. And we would and I noticed all of these memorials. There were different memorials. There was like Congressional Medal of Honor memorial. There was the Civil War memorial, and all of those things about town. So we created a map, and we made a map of all of these memorials and talked about what they were for and researched them. And we put all of that in a brochure and a map. And we brought that to the American Legion and to the AMVETS and the Chamber of Commerce. And that was like our little gift to the community. And so people could socially distance and walk the town, walk the village, and see these things. So those are the kind of things that I've tried to do this year with my current class, just to, first off, so we wouldn't be stuck in the building, because technically we were kind of, even though we weren't quarantined, we were kind of isolated from everything, and to get us out and get to do things, but also for them too, so they could kind of get outside of just the whole isolation of it. It was, anyway, so I know you're not surprised by any of that.
Um, I do remember that an article actually came out on the heart attack that you guys did, right? Like the Malone Telegram posted about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember Jeremy read that and he's like, "That's a weird title," but I'm glad that you explained what it means because it makes sense now. He's like, "What do you mean they heart attack people?"
Well, we just would go to their windows, like the mayor's window. I park in the parking lot right behind her office. And so the window to her office, I knew which one it was. And the kids went up and they all posted, and they put little messages on it too. We heart attacked the church too, because my classroom, even though it's going to sound silly, well, odd, because separation of church and state,
Yeah.
we aren't indoctrinating, or it's in a Methodist church. We did not make my students Methodists, but it's right next to the courthouse. So if there's a trial or something going on, we can just pop right over to the courthouse and we can go there. So we heart attacked the church, and we put all sorts of they have a bulletin board, like a community bulletin board in the church. And we put all sorts of hearts on there, and just with affirmations, we just little words, not necessarily a whole affirmation, but just little affirmative words, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sound like you could almost be my mom.
Really? I wonder how that happened.
There's just a lot of similarities here.
Yeah, I can't imagine how that works.
No, no. Oh, that was funny. So I did see also those memorials that you guys put up, and I think I might make a separate blog post, or maybe you can make the blog post because you are a writer, and I can
Mhm.
feature this to share on my blog to show what you guys did because it was really cool. Explaining it is good, but actually seeing what you guys did and putting,
Mhm.
because I mean, you guys had to do research to put
Mhm.
together these memorials, and then they became like the signs, right?
Right.
Yeah, that was cool. And I think that's good because a lot of, especially with COVID, it felt like in the very beginning, like you said, last year we were all scared because there wasn't any answers. It was just like,
Right.
there's this crazy thing happening. Stay home. Good luck.
Exactly.
um, and then this year it was kind of up to, I feel like it, not necessarily as individuals, but it felt very individualized of how we would cope with our circumstances.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It's difficult too, because as you know, I do have the dogs, but I live alone. And so the first couple of months, I mean, I didn't see anybody. I ordered from Instacart and I'd meet them in Papa and Grandma's driveway because Instacart doesn't deliver out far where I live. And I would go pick up my food, and that'd be my only interaction with people. And I'd walk the dogs in the woods, and occasionally I'd run into people that were out in the same woods that had the same idea as I did. Let's get out and let's see something. But I would go a long time without actually seeing someone. I mean, I talked to them like we're doing now, but it wasn't the same.
yeah.
And then I go to this year and where the school year is, where, okay, so I can see you, but I've got to keep my mask on at all times. And so it's really weird. Sometimes I will keep my attendance page up on my classroom because there's pictures of my students without masks, because I actually go quite some all sorts of time without actually seeing their faces. So when I have the sorry, it's my knitting needle, but when I have the pictures pop up of them on the attendance page in our program that does attendance, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what they look like. Strange.
You're used to this.
Yeah, I'm used to this.
That's funny.
Exactly.
Um, so I wanted to direct the conversation for a moment back to your pregnancy.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm bringing this back is not only for like a future thing that I can listen to when I do finally get to be a mama, uh,
Hmm.
but for the fact that most people do not know that you had twins naturally.
I did. All of it was naturally. I didn't have any um no fertility treatments, and I had you without a cesarean. That actually was a fight, but I won. And it was odd. I know that you know this story, but the night before my first sonogram, so this was, I was about 10 weeks pregnant, and I remember going to the doctor just to make sure that the little, when you pee on the stick, you're always like, okay, but let's go get the doctor's diagnosis to make sure. And just to start the whole, the whole process, like getting your prenatal vitamins and all of that stuff. Which, by the way, I'm really jealous you have gummies now, because those prenatal vitamins they gave me always made me sick and I couldn't keep them down. But anyway, so the night before that happened, I had this dream, and I'm pretty sure I've told you about the dream. And it was a really bizarre dream. There were really bizarre parts of the dream that I'll try and not gross people out too much about it. But so in my dream, I dreamt that I was having twins, and the way I knew that you were twins and that you were going to be boy girl twins, which is kind of funny when I'm going to tell the next part of our story here later, um, was those little footed pajamas, the Dr. Dentons. I dreamt that you were born in little pink and blue Dr. Dentons, that you were in pink and your brother was in blue, And mind you, I was just barely like 2.5 months pregnant. I mean, 10 weeks, 10.5 weeks pregnant. And that's not very far along at all. And so I dreamt that you were in these little baby Dr. Nettons, the pink and the blue. And instead of cutting the umbilical cord, though, that you were born in I just want to point out again that you were born in the pajamas, not that they put you in the pajamas. So when you were born, you came out in these pajamas. And then the other part of the dream was, instead of cutting the umbilical cord, they cut off your left foot. And I just remember being freaked out about that. Like, why would they do that? Why would they do that? And someone was saying, no, that's normal. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And so I woke up from my dream, like, oh, thank God that was a dream. And I went to that the next day. I went, woke up, did all my stuff, went to the doctor's and had the sonogram. And as I was sitting there, I'm watching. And so let's see if I can keep this off so you don't see my screen. So here I'm watching the monitor, and I'm watching, and I'm looking, because that dream is stuck in my head. And I know that at that development level, you're probably not going to have hands, arms, and legs that I can see really well. But I was looking, it's like, make sure they got all of their fingers, not the fingers, but make sure they got all their limbs. And I'm looking to make sure this baby. And so all of a sudden, there were two techs in the room, two sonogram techs. They took the screen from here. Oh, sorry. There. They took the screen from here, and then they went like that, so I couldn't see it anymore. I'm like, oh God, they're missing a leg. He's missing a leg. There's something wrong with my baby, and they don't want to tell me. And so they started talking to me, and I said something about, and I told them about my dream, and they said, well, do twins run in your family? And I said, yes, my one grandma is a twin, and my other grandma miscarried twins. So yeah, twins do run in my family. And so then the other tech comes back in, and she says, well, we just talked to your doctor, and she says, we can tell you. I'm like, oh God, they don't have a leg. They're missing an arm. My dream. Oh my goodness, my dream. And I remember that morning, before I'd gone for the sonogram, I called my aunt and I said, Aunt Laura, this is the dream I had last night. I'm going for my sonogram. And she said, Tracy, what did you eat before you went to bed? And I said, Doritos and Pepsi. And she said, don't ever have that again. Okay. So anyway, so then the tech comes back in. She says, your doctor says we can tell you. And I said, oh, okay. Because again, I'm freaking out, thinking that you don't have all your limbs. There's something wrong with you. And she said, you're having twins. I'm like, oh, is that all? But they have all their arms and legs, right? And then it was quite a shock. And the little, in the sonogram, I could see you kind of look like little swimmers. You just were kind of floating around, just teeny tiny little things. You weren't very big. And they took some pictures and they printed them out for me. And I remember bringing them home to your grandma Carol and showing them to her and telling her I was going to have twins. And and at the time, of course, Grandma Carol did too, that my bestie, Aunt Julie, she was having twins, and she was on bed rest at that point, because her twins, this was in December, and her twins would end up being born probably about a month later. It was like the first little bit of December when I found out I was having twins, and she had her twins the first few days of January. So Grandma Carol told me that you're not having twins. Really funny, ha. You're just jealous because your friend Julie's having twins. And I'm like, who's jealous of that? And I could see if it was a practical joke or something, but I wasn't jealous. She was having twins and I wasn't. And I kept saying, no, I'm having twins. And she just wouldn't believe me. And I had to take the sonogram picture and hold it up. And the closest light that I could find for her was on one of those little range hood lights on the stove. So I brought the sonogram and held it up underneath so she could see it. And I said, see right here, it says twin A and twin B. She says, you got this from Julie. I'm like, no, I didn't. You can see right here where it says Tracy. And she says, you're still lying. I'm like, no, I'm not. It says twin A, twin B. My name's on it. What more do you need? And so then she says, and so I pointed to, I'm guessing, I always considered you twin A and your brother twin B, but I'm not sure, because at that stage, who knew, right? I mean, you were lucky you did have your little stumpy arms for your little. And so she said, that's not a baby, that's your kidney. It's like, okay. So as you know, we can fast forward to now. I like to tease and say that now I have a 6'2" kidney.
Yes.
That'd be your brother, not you.
Yes. And it will shock many of you that know my brother and I, but I am older by 3 minutes.
Yes. 3 whole minutes. I had enough
But
time to catch my breath.
yeah, that is what I always have said to you. I think is like you're stronger than I can imagine for myself because the strength of having two babies naturally, no medication, nothing, and not saying
No, I
for
didn't even
anyone
have a
listening,
Tylenol.
yeah, and for
I didn't
anyone
even have a
listening,
Tylenol.
it's
No
no
painkillers.
disrespect.
By the time I asked for it, because they're like, I'm like, okay, well, maybe now. And they said, no, you can't. You're fully dilated. They're coming. I'm like, okay, then we're going. And then I walked back to the room after I had you.
Oh, you pulled like a Princess Kate coming out in her dress, just like, I just had this baby just now.
Yeah, well, then I did have a little hemorrhage problem. So, but it's all fixed now. We're all good.
That's good. That's good. Um, so yes, thank you for sharing that. It is funny, looking back at it. Well, obviously I was not mentally present for a lot of that, but just looking back at my brother and how a
Mhm.
lot of people think he's older than me. Um,
I think it goes with size. I think somehow people equate size with age.
yeah, and he does have like that bulky, like I'm gonna
Oh,
beat your
yes.
butt look or whatever, and
Oh,
I'm
yes.
just this like little stick. Actually, some people like to refer me to olive oil. Actually, that's
Yes.
Tony that always called me olive oil. Um,
Yes.
from Popeye, for those of you that do not know who olive oil is.
So this is what I got for Mother's Day from your brother.
Ooh,
Yes. Hope you there. Is that better? Can you see it less glare?
yes. Oh, that's
So
nice.
there, I'm in the middle, and that's his lovely bride. Um, as you can see, he's tiny.
Yes.
I always call him my wheat fry.
Oh, that's so funny. We
Yeah.
fry.
And then he picks on me and says that he's only little because of me, because I'm not as tall as as your dad, which
Yeah.
I don't think a woman being as tall as your dad is really, I don't know. It's not really not necessarily attractive in a woman to be that tall. But I blame you. I always tell him, listen, he had to share with you. I said, blame your womb mate. I gave you everything I could.
Hey, there is beauty in a 6'8" woman.
I'm sure there is. I'm
Um,
just not that woman.
yes, yes. And yeah, I do recall you say a lot of times you're like, I'm getting shorter.
Well, I think that's just a
Chicken.
scoliosis or something. After a while, that scoliosis gets you. But I remember telling your Aunt Mary Mac that I gave you scoliosis, and she said, "Well, isn't that lovely?" like it was something contagious. No, she has a spinal curvature. She would probably be about 5'10" without that, but
Yes, I could have been a supermodel with the
yes.
the height and everything. Um, so let's talk about writing because
Okay.
this is something you love, but
It
you
is
have
something I love.
put on the back burner.
I did. I did. Well, the thing with the blogging, and I loved blogging, the thing of it was that I found that being that vulnerable, because it was a vulnerability, even though I would use my humor, um, being that vulnerable just kind of opened me up to, I thought, just a lot of criticism that I felt like I was inviting onto myself. And I don't know if you experienced that at all with the podcasting, but when you do something like that, you get people that are like, I don't know, that who does she think she is kind of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it got a little discouraging. And I don't know that I was criticized overly for it, but one of the things that I did find that was discouraging about doing it was, I really think, and this is just confidentially between us and all of your your viewers. Um, I think it kind of cramped my dating style because I think that people, I don't know if they heard about the blog and thought maybe I was going to use them as fodder for my blog or something, which
You're
I
gonna
wasn't,
Taylor
but
Swift them?
oh, right, exactly. Taylor Swift them. Yeah. And have these secret messages as to who was the target. Um, but it wasn't that way. Speaking of dating, just got a little message. But anyway, so I think that was part of it, because I remember one of my last blog topics, I was going to say I was going to start blogging about dating, but then I realized that was probably a mistake. It would have been good for blogging. I can tell you lots of stories about things that have happened to me on the online dating scene, and most of them are entertaining. Some of them are truly frightening. Thank goodness there were some that I never got to the meet stage for, like meeting them, because I called those meets. I didn't call them dates. So if I was going to go meet somebody, I'd call them a meet. I wouldn't call it a date, because I'm just meeting you. We're not dating. And for someone that likes to write and likes to read, words are important. So anyway, so I don't know. I just kind of stopped doing it. And it took a while. I mean, it was taking I was blogging probably a couple hours a day, and I used that time instead from my blogging to start exercising and working out and taking the dogs. And so I guess I had to switch gears. I think there would still be enough time to blog, but I'm not sure.
Well, maybe it is almost time for shifting to a book, because then you have time to put in the time that you can. But
Maybe.
also, it gives you time to think about like what it is that you are conveying in the
Mhm.
messages. So maybe it's time to write a book.
Maybe I'll have to consider that. I know you want me to. And I
Yes.
always wonder what I would write about and what if people would read it.
I think it's very interesting that you say that, because this is something that Priscilla and I are going to actually be talking about on the next podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's along those lines. Jay St. Hilaire, we give him mad credit for this, because he's the first one that said it on this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
saying that you can be from a small town,
Mm-hmm.
love your small town,
I do.
but don't have a small town mindset.
Right.
So what that means, and I like to use the Moana references as well, because I think it's perfect.
My little Disney
There's
princess.
Yeah, so there's many of my friends, and I think you included, that love our home. We love where we came from. We love our family. There's no doubt about that. And if anybody
Right.
does doubt that, you're hearing it now. We love you. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing against a small town.
Definitely not.
But it's okay to have that feeling of wanting to get off the reef to help other people to grow. And not saying that you have to leave the small town to do this, but it can
Right.
go beyond the reef. That's my
Mm-hmm.
favorite quote from Moana, going beyond the reef. So, with that being said, maybe there are people that will not read it just for the fact of, some people don't like us in general. It's everybody
Yeah.
has that person that does not like
Right.
someone. But maybe it would help other people beyond the reef. And maybe even
Maybe.
within the reef. Maybe there are people that would read it, that you don't realize would read it. Like there are people that listen to the Brie Pod that I'm like, really? I'm still working on my own work on, finding my own worthiness, and do I have a voice?
Mhm.
Do I not have a voice? Um,
I was thinking about that today, actually. That whole, I think that you and I have this in common, and I don't think it's something that I necessarily taught you. I just think that we've had similar experiences in some regard, and that there's that one or two negative voices that we always hear. So you could have, of all of your family, acquaintances, relatives, friends, whoever, Instead of listening to the 98 that are saying great things and
Yeah.
saying, keep it out there and do your stuff because we're proud of you. You're listening to the one, and I have one in mind right now that we will definitely not name. And that person, I just remember that person telling me, well, I'm not fake like you.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, where's that coming from? But I knew not to ask that person because that person would more than tell me how I was so fake. And I had ruined their life because I was so fake. And it's not, this person was not male. That's all I will say about that. It was not a male person. But so when like today, and I was getting ready for this, I threw a little makeup on, just a little bit. As you can see, I didn't cover up all my little readiness, but and all I could think of was that person. Well, was I'm not fake. Like, okay. And those people do get you. And I don't know, and I don't mean they get you like they understand you. I mean they get to you and they get under your skin. And it's hard to kind of let that go because it's like this little bit of poison that kind of, it doesn't bother you all the time, but it's, oh, I've got a worse, ooh, this is a bad, it's like a cold sore. Like you've got that little virus in you. I don't have cold sores, but you have that little virus in you, and all of a sudden it rears its ugly head and it just won't go away. And the whole time you think you're fine, then oh damn, that's that cold sore again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that comes from a deep sense of care because even though um that happens with like holding on to that negative thought, I feel like the reason why we hold on to it so tightly is because it it's kind of weird to say, but like you love them and you're like,
Mhm.
why can't you just love me too?
Exactly. I remember speaking about this person to someone else, and the person said, well, that's just so and so, and that's just how she is. And I just remember really getting upset about that. And I said, well, I don't understand why it's not the other way around then. And the person looked at me and she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, why can't I just be Tracy? Why is it such a bad thing for me to be Tracy? It's okay for that person to be just who they are, but it's bad for me to be me. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. It's definitely unfortunate, but
Mhm.
we both have to learn, and we're learning
Yes, we do. We both do.
that that we do have something to say and our voices do need to be heard. So those couple of negative people in our lives are not what defines who we are or what we're meant to
Definitely not.
do, like our purpose.
Mhm.
And I think that's why I continue to do the pre-pod because I know my purpose is bigger than my fear. And I think that's something you should hold on to for your book.
See, when I think about my book, though, it always comes out like eat, pray, love in my head. And I'm thinking, but that's already been done. They already did eat, pray, love.
You just do
But
it
then her
backwards.
happy ending turned into something really odd, the lady that did that. So I'm like, well, maybe.
See? And you can change that perspective. So let's talk a little bit about um what are some like fun facts that we may have missed during the getting to know my mom
Let's see.
or our
Fun
mom, Jerry.
facts. Well, there's one that I try not to talk about ever, in that I really don't have a first name.
Oh yes, yeah, we
We aren't
won't
going to talk
say
about that
what
because I
those
still don't
names
talk about
are.
it. Um, I really don't. It's kind of a family thing. And I did not carry that on with you, and I will not. And please, when you do have my grandbabies, do not do that with them either. Give them a name that you will call them.
Yes, well, we should let the listeners know that she has been called Tracy since birth.
Since birth.
Since
Yes.
birth. So that first name that exists was never used. So that's why
Ever.
you can't ever really call her that because she never was that.
Yes. I remember there would be teachers in school, a substitute, and they'd call me that, and I wouldn't look. And they were gonna. One lady, I think she wanted to write me up, and this I remember. There was a girl in my class named Chantel, and she just kind of she was so snippy sometimes, and she's like, "She's not gonna answer you," and I was like, "Are you talking about me? Because I have no idea who you're talking to." And I just hadn't heard it because you hear your name, and when you hear your name, your ears perk up, and that's not my name. So
It's
that's
not
a
mine.
fact. It's not my name.
Okay.
So that's one. Let's see. Well, it's pretty obvious, I think, that I'm a ginger. That's not a fun fact, but it does kind of. I get people to ask questions. One of the students, they always ask me, well, they'll tease me about being a ginger, and they'll say that I don't have a soul. And so I used to say, oh yes, I do. All my freckles are the souls of students that I've stolen, and I have them here forever. And I always point to one, I'm like, in this one, and I call it Cody because I always had a Cody, and it was a popular name for a while anyway. I haven't had a Cody in a while. And so I told that story to my students a couple years ago, and one of the girls in class says, well, can you name one after me? And so I pointed to one and I said, well, this one, it's not there anymore. But I said, but this one, I need to get it cut out because it's kind of growing together and I want to make sure it's, and she said, well, name that one after me. So I named it after her and I went to the dermatologist and had it cut out. And then when I saw her after that and I got my results, I think I can say her first name. I'm like, Linny, guess what? You're benign. And she says, I knew I would be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
So,
I need to
other
add,
fun facts.
yeah,
You want
I
any
actually
more?
need to add your fun facts. So there are two that we're going to go into before we wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
One being that you went from not being a runner at all,
Right?
doing almost 3 to 5 to even 10 miles in a day.
Yes.
Even more.
Yes.
Can't say that that's your max because it's been more. So, how
Right.
did that come about?
Well, that came about, as you know, you and your aunt said, hey, let's go do one of those inflatable 5K races. And you were like, oh, that's cool. We'll dress up. And so you and Jeremy got me a Supergirl costume, which I am, well, I'm not going to put any feeling to it, but we were out and so I had a t-shirt and I had a pair of shorts and it took the three of us to get that Supergirl costume on me. And it was an extra large and it was all we could do to get that over my head and pulled down. And so there's your husband. I think you were engaged then though. I don't think you were married, right? Pretty sure you were engaged.
I think so.
Yeah, you were engaged because it was the year before you got married.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because at your wedding I looked much different a year later. And um, so the two of you are just yanking with all your might to put that dress on me, which I don't know that I've ever talked about too much publicly. So there you go. That's a true part of the story. And so then I ran this 5K. I say ran. I did run part of it. And I didn't run very far at all. And your aunt's mother-in-law, who was obviously older than me because she was old enough to be your uncle's mother, she was actually beating me. And not only did she beat me, I would go to these, I would get to those obstacles and I couldn't do the obstacles to save my life because it was just, I mean, it was a hard thing to do anyway. I think I probably still have a hard time doing those obstacles because, you're kind of running and it's like running through a bounce house with different things kind of coming at you. And Jeremy, of course, is like, he came back to do it 2 or 3 times. And, and I was like, okay. So we get to the end of the race and I did make it to the end of the race. Ironically, your aunt's mother-in-law waited for me so she could go across the finish line with me so I wouldn't be alone in the finish line. And we went down the slide because that was how you ended the race. You went down that slide thing. And at the bottom, they handed you your trophy, your ribbon and a thing of cold water. And I remember just putting that cold water to my head and kind of collapsing on the ground. And all of your aunts and uncles, because your aunt had convinced quite a few of us to go down. So there was 2 aunts and an uncle, a couple cousins, you and Jeremy. No, probably when it's all said and done, maybe at least 10, 15 of us, right? There was quite a
Yeah, it
few in
was
that
a
year.
huge group.
It was a huge group. I was last out of all of them. And I just remember everybody standing over me like, get up, you got to get up for the picture. And I was like, I can't get up. Just, and so I did get up, took the picture, and we went to lunch with Grandma and Papa. And your grandfather, who is never serious, always joking, even when things are really bad, your grandfather always finds a way to joke. He just looked across the table at me and he said, "You do know we have heart disease in this family, don't you?" And my cousin had just had a heart transplant. It had nothing to do with the heart disease, though. It was because of, it's just different factors, but he had a heart transplant like about a month before we gone on this run. And he was 48. So that makes me 40. So I was 46 at the time. So it was about 4 years ago. And the next week I joined Weight Watchers and I decided that I wasn't going to do that again. So I started running 5Ks and I would walk, then run, walk, then run. Well, by the time it came along to, I think it might have even been the year you got married. I don't know that it was immediate, but I just remember your same aunt that we did the inflatable K race. Because fun fact for me also about me, I have 4 sisters. So this aunt knows who she is. We were running my first turkey trot, and the turkey trot we ran that year, I could look it up because I do have a little thing about it. I was on the front page of the paper. The turkey trot that year, that was my first 5K where I ran the whole race and I didn't stop running. And then the next year, so I think this was after you got married, the next year I ran my first 10K and I was the last in that race. I mean, dead last. So as I was running the race, I would tell, they had different, different places where you could get water and that kind of thing. So I'm running the race and I would stop and get my water and try not to, it's hard for me when we do those races to drink because I always choke and I don't want to be choking and like, sorry to say this, but like coughing up and spitting up water and stuff. When we did that turkey trot in Phoenix, by the way, and everybody's eating those little pumpkin pie shots, I'm like, not a chance. I'll be choked and they'll have to do the Heimlich and get me up off the ground. But so at each of those little stops, I would tell them I'm the last one. And so I knew that there was a police car behind me. And I don't think I can look up the picture and talk to you at the same time, but there was a police car behind me. We'll put it up in the little thing you do afterwards. Okay. So, and then I get to the next one and I try to run for this 10K. I couldn't run the whole 10K. I try to run for the 10K and I'd have to walk for part of it. And I got to the next one. So now I'm at my second place where there's police escort. And I said, okay, I'm the last one. And so they turned around and I wasn't really paying attention to them, but I knew that that one car was following me. And then I got to the third one, and the third one was at the bottom of this big hill that was not necessarily really steep, but it's about half a mile up. So even at an easy grade, half a mile or so up a hill is still kind of daunting at the last bit of the race. And I had to walk up part of that hill and it was kind of embarrassing, even though I was in, at this point I could run 5Ks without stopping. I was doing okay. But I just couldn't help it. I had to walk part of it because it was just, 10K is 6 miles. So I managed to get up to the top of the hill and I managed to walk just a little bit and I could see the finish line. So I start running and I'm running and I can hear people yelling to me, come on, you can do it. And there's like the mayor, the lady I heart attacked. And she's like, oh, you can do it. And so I was running and I ran across the finish line dead last, like I said. And it wasn't until I saw the picture that she posted on Facebook that I figured out that all 3 policemen were following me with the lights and everything. So Anyway, it was funny afterwards. At the time, I was, a little bit burnt out, but the next 10K, I didn't lose. I was second to last and I would have come in even faster, except I got lost on where the finish line was because it was actually by the school that you went to and the school that I went to, and I'm on the school board for. And they said, okay, once you get past the bus garage, make sure you go through these gates. And so I went past the bus garage, but I ended up going longer. So I might have actually, had I taken the correct route instead of the long way home, I may have actually been like third from the last instead of second from last. And so I went from there and I just kept running though. And I kept doing that. So I've run, well, I've got a trophy. I've got you gave it to me, a little thing to hang my ribbons on with my bib numbers. And it's been a while since I've done a 5K because of COVID, but I usually do about 3 or 4 a year. And I take the dogs, like now that the ice and snow are gone here, I take the dogs and we've been doing about 3.5 miles a day. But right now we're doing the walking because it's still muddy and it's a little treacherous with, and there's been a lot of rain. So it's been a little bit treacherous for running yet, but we'll be getting back to it, the dogs and I, and they love it.
Yes, they do. Tibbles, if he knew what we were talking about, probably be barking.
Yes.
Um, so thank you for sharing that because it's funny. I read this quote a long time ago that said, "Don't marry into a family that does what is it, 5Ks
On
um
Thanksgiving.
on Thanksgiving." And we became that family because
We did.
we ended up doing that. And then we used to do, before I think COVID really knocked us all out, we
Hmm.
were doing Memorial Day weekend runs. So
Hmm.
it's crazy how it's sad that COVID stopped that, but I know that it's not like a thing that stops with the family because I'm sure once it
Right.
gets back up, we'll do it again.
Well, that was
I'm
my favorite 5K was the turkey trot in Phoenix when I went to see you and Jeremy there. And what
Yeah,
was really fun for me at that race, which is going to sound really mean, and I don't mean it to be mean, but that was probably my best 5K. I think I'd gotten, that was the weather was perfect in November in Phoenix. It was perfect. And I think that was my best time. And I remember crossing the finish line and I wasn't even sure where you and Jeremy were because Jeremy had hung back with you. And I
yep.
was like, okay, they'll be here any minute. They'll be here any minute. And then, and I was like, wow. But it wasn't, it wasn't, I just really had a really good race. And so it was hard because when you came across, I was so happy to see you and Jeremy come across, but then it's part of me, the competitive part of me, not your mom part, the competitive Tracy part,
Yes.
not Bree's mom, that was like, but I beat you.
I mean, hey, that's still a huge victory from where you started, that first one, to
Exactly.
where you are. So I do not take offense. People that know me, I am not. I have been told by my runner friends that you don't have to be a runner. Like eventually, it can come to you where you can do
Mhm.
it. So I can't say that I'm not a runner or I can't be a runner. It's
Right.
just I do not like I don't like running. But I do hope that like one of
See,
my oops, sorry.
well, I never liked running either. When I was in high school, I used to get in trouble because he'd make us run around the backstops 2 or 3 times. And I would just be like, I don't want to run. And so I'd walk fast and he'd make me do a third one because I told you to run. You get out there and you run. And he was not nice to certain people. Other people, of course, he was wonderful too, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So because he was your teacher too. And I'm like, I'm not going to ever be a runner. And I just remember thinking, I'm not ever going to have to run. This is not a skill I need for high school. So, and you're overweight anyway, gym teacher. I just remember being such a snot in my head. I never would have said that to anybody. Um, but yeah. And now, yeah,
Now you're doing 3 miles. And so there's still hope,
there's
everyone.
still hope.
I think for me, I've decided that one of my big goals, because you know that I was doing lifting with a trainer,
Mhm.
one of my big goals is that I still want to enter a bikini competition, but I've been thinking about waiting until after a pregnancy because you know that right now my biggest goal is to have a baby.
Mhm.
So my goal, I'm going to state it in here so that I remember it. My goal is to officially be in a bikini competition with scars and all, because I know that there's going to be scars on my stomach from my endo surgery, and I do have a feeling, that intuitive feeling, that I also will unfortunately have to have a C-section. So I'm preparing. Not that's unfortunate for, I understand like it's a good thing too, but that, you know, that sometimes it's that feeling of that, oh, like I would have loved to do natural, but my intuition, I trust. So with that being said, that is my goal for the future.
See, I was
Um,
hoping this last year to do a half marathon for my 50th birthday, but COVID blew that out of the water, and there won't be a marathon this year either. So I'm gonna have to try for 52, I guess.
Hey, 52. That's a good one. That's still good. That's where you can take the deck, right, and throw it all over the place.
That's right. I've got the whole set then.
Yeah. So
When I'm
be
54, I'll have the whole deck plus the two jokers.
exactly, see? It's only a deck of cards.
Only deck of cards.
So with that being said, before we go, a um quick background of you actually be pre-COVID were traveling every year.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
where have you been?
Well, I have been to Europe twice. The farthest away I've been is St. Petersburg, Russia. That was my favorite place to go. I've always wanted to go there because you know I'm into history and that kind of thing. And I remember when I was in high school, they used to have these things they called mini series where you would watch this instead of being a full series, there'd be like 3 or 4 episodes of this story that you'd watch, like, you know, maybe Tuesday and Thursday of this week and Tuesday, Thursday of the next week. And it was called Peter the Great, Peter Ustinov's Peter the Great. And it was all about Peter the Great of Russia, the Tsar. And he built St. Petersburg basically in a swamp. He actually drained a swamp to build the city. And I always wanted to go there because it just seemed so fascinating. And I went there and I loved it. I've so that was my Baltic cruise. And I went to Copenhagen, Oslo. When I was in Sweden, in Stockholm, I think, there was a Nazi protest. And I remember being in a kayak because, you know, it's one of the things I like to do no matter where I go in the world. When I go travel, I want a kayak. Except when I went to Mexico, I didn't get to kayak. I took a sea-doo and I was out sea-dooing in Cozumel. But anyway, I like to get out on the water and like on a little kayak or whatever. So there I am in the kayak and they were speaking Swedish. There were these two guys that were engineers and they were Swedish engineers and they were speaking Swedish in front of me and they were talking and I couldn't understand any word that they were saying except Nazi. And so then they kind of gestured over there and so I got my little kayak closer so I could hear the story because I thought that they translate it for me to English. And I thought they were talking about the Nazis during World War II. And me being a history person, you know, I have a bachelor's degree in history. I thought, oh, he's going to tell me a story about the Nazis. And this will be interesting because I think the Nazis did try to invade. And so I was trying to remember my World War II history and how far the Germans got and everything, right? Only to discover that that particular day, as I'm in my kayak, there is a Nazi protest going on, and he had taken us an extra long time to try to avoid that. So I had booked this kayak excursion, and I have done this before where I'm the only person from the cruise ship that wants to go do whatever it is. And so I booked it. And I was really excited to go on that. And there was no one else from the cruise ship that was with me on that particular leg of the, there might have been people that had gone earlier in the day, but my time was different. So there I was in my kayak. It's so funny now. And there's all these drums, and they're just beating the drums, not for justice, unfortunately. They're beating the drums for fascism and whatever else that, whatever groups they hated, and they just wanted to protest against them. And they're on the shoreline, and we're in this like canal kind of thing. And so the Nazis are on the shoreline, and then there's a police cruiser, but a boat, a patrol boat. They're between me and the Nazis. And on the other side of that, there I am in the kayak, and there's a gay pride boat. And the gay pride boat is festooned with all the rainbows and everything. And I only see one guy on the boat. I'm like, dude, I hope you've got backup, because I'm just here in the kayak. I can't help you. So I'm just sitting there in the middle of this canal in Sweden, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, this could get ugly. And so they let us off a little bit late, and they told us if we missed the boat, literally, if we missed the bus getting back, that we were stuck there. And I did have, enough money to get me something, but that's how cruising works. If you get stuck in a port, the boat won't stay for you. They aren't like, oh, well, Tracy's there, we have to wait for Tracy. So I rushed. I mean, as soon as I got out of that kayak, I jumped up and I was like, thanks, bye. And everybody else is having crackers and cheese and wine or water or whatever, because it's a great tour. And it was a great tour. I'm sorry to say that I didn't stay and chit chat with the people more. And I'm just running across the city. And I see these men, like the SWAT team. And, these are these big, they're like this wide, and like their shoulders are just broad men, and they've got the guns. And I don't know what's said on the background, but I'm sure it was something like our equivalent of SWAT, right? So the SWAT team's out, and I'm like trying to get to the double-decker bus, only to find out when I got in, I ran on that bus. It's a good thing I had my running going for me at that point. And I sat down, and that's when they announced, because we're having a hard, some people are having a hard time getting to the bus because of the protest, we're going to have 2 more buses after this. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going to sit right here. I'm not getting off. And I just remember sitting on the bus. And the funniest thing to me, and especially now, was one of the things I'd wanted to do. One of my favorite childhood characters was Pippi Longstocking. And Pippi Longstocking had her hair in braids, and her braids always kind of went kind of haywire. And whenever I try and braid my hair, it goes kind of haywire. I think you can relate to that too. Sorry. And she had red hair, and she was just kind of an awkward kid, but kind of out there, and she was brave, and her father was a pirate or something. I can't remember the whole story. I just remember loving Pippi Longstocking because she would get herself in trouble and get herself in all these little adventures. And I remember seeing a little display with Pippi Longstocking, and I'd wanted to take a selfie with it. And I remember sitting on the bus like, I'm not going to get my Pippi Longstocking selfie. And I didn't, because I was just so worried that they were going to leave me there on the sidewalk. So I've had some adventures when I travel. Another adventure I had was when I was in Greece. I went to the Acropolis, I'm going to say it wrong. The Acropolis, I think, the Parthenon. I saw Mars Hill, where St. Paul spoke, and he preached the gospel. And it was just kind of really cool being there, because like remembering all the stories from Sunday school, being very Southern Baptist in upstate New York, it was an interesting experience. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is so awesome. But that particular day, because I was alone, I decided, they kept telling us, you got to be careful because there's pickpockets. That was when a whole bunch of people were there was like this migrant crisis, and they were coming from Turkey and different places, and they were just flooding Greece because they were, concerned about different things going on. And so there were refugees. And so the refugees are here, and some of them are pickpockets, and so be careful. And I remember asking this gentleman that I had met, and he was an older retired professor from, I think, University of California or something. And I said, do you want to share a cab? Wouldn't it be better if we just did a private cab together, and, we could split the cost or whatever? And he said, no. And he kept calling me Christy. He didn't get my name right. And he's like, Christy, they're just trying to scare you. And I said, well, they've done a good job. because every time, every 2 minutes, don't forget there's pickpockets and, don't bring all your valuables and that kind of thing. And so when I got off the pier and I went to the, where different people were, like the cabs and things, I saw this lady, and she and I are still friends on Facebook, by the way. I saw Lisa, and she said that she'd give me this marvelous tour, and she told me how much it was, and I splurged that day, and I got my private tour, and she took me everywhere, and she knew when to get me there to beat the crowds and everything. And so there I am on top of one of the highest hills in Athens, Greece, and I'm with all of these ruins from ancient Greece that I'd read about my whole life, and I'm just taking in the scenery, and I hear this person behind me saying, "Christy." And I turn around and there he is. And I said, "Yeah, what's up?" And he said, "I've lost my wallet. Do you have any money you can lend me so I can use it to get back to the ship?" And he says, "I think I've lost it. I don't know what happened." Well, he was pickpocketed because he took the bus. And so it wasn't funny, but thankfully I did have cash for him. And I went to and so I was able to give him some cash, and he did pay me back. He was awesome. But that day was pretty awesome, because not for that purpose, but the fact that I had decided to be in the taxi and have that private experience. I went to lunch and I had the best red snapper ever, and they like grilled it, and they came and they dressed it for me, like they took the bones out of it for me and everything, and the bread was just awesome. It was just an amazing day, and I had a great time. I went to Rome that year. The French coastline, that was one of my favorites. I've been to Alaska. I've cruised from Montreal to Boston, which is kind of for me a local cruise, but that was my first getting my feet in the water. And I think that you're kind of big on this with whole visions, and you're talking about your intuition. And so the story behind that cruise is pretty awesome, as I know, but I just remember it was wintertime, and I was sitting in my chair, and I just had this vision. I mean, it was a really clear vision. And it was me sitting on a deck of a boat on the St. Lawrence River. And I was sitting on like a chaise lounge, and I looked over my ankles, kind of had my legs extended, crossed at the ankle. And I looked over the river, and I knew in my vision that that was the St. Lawrence, which is really weird, because as much as I've been on the St. Lawrence and my grandmother's camp was on the St. Lawrence, I've never really cruised the whole length of it, and I've always wanted to. And so that was the vision. And I thought, well, so I started looking at cruises, and I couldn't afford any of them. I was like, oh, well, that's great. That'll be for like future times. And so it was probably July that same year. I had worked all summer, and it was like the end of summer school, and I'd had enough money saved, and I just walked into a travel agency and said, "Hey, I have this much money. What can I do?" And she said, "You can go on a cruise from Montreal to Boston." And I said, "Okay, how much is it?" And she said, "It's this much." And I handed her my debit card, and that was it. And so I brought my knitting,
Yeah, I
which
was gonna
got a little
say,
bigger since.
how far have you gone with that?
Well, not too far, because I want to put it. I trying not to do it too much. I hear the needles click. I don't want people to wonder what that noise is. And so I brought my knitting on the boat, and I was sitting there knitting a shawl. It was one of those at sea days where you can do whatever you wanted. And I was just sitting, and I was enjoying the sunshine with all my sunscreen on. And I looked over my ankles, and I saw the river, and I'm like, this is it. This is my vision. It happened. And it was pretty cool. And so up until COVID, I would cruise every summer, not the whole summer, of course. I'd take the last 2 weeks of the year, because I worked summer school every year until COVID started. And I have been to Bermuda. The year you got married, I went to Bermuda. I started from New York City, which was pretty awesome. So on the 4th of July, I've got a picture of me. That year I went ahead because because your wedding was in September. So I didn't want to have that last week. So I would have this picture of me dressed in my 4th of July outfit in front of the Statue of Liberty on the cruise ship. And that was pretty cool. Let's see, Where else have I been? Alaska, Rome, um, my Baltic cruise. So I think 5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah. Um, which a side note, because we haven't mentioned it, you did all of these by yourself.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Which did freak out the grandmas.
Yes, it did. Yep. And I ignored them.
um,
I still have
yes.
people like, oh my gosh, you did that by yourself. I'm like, well, yeah, because I I have this little saying that I've made up, I guess, but maybe someone else has said it before. But if I have the difference between no go or solo, I'm going solo. I'm just not that. And I think that there's a certain freedom to it too. And it's so incredibly freeing to not have to do what someone else wants you to do what you want to do. And that's one of the things I learned on my first cruise. I wanted to kayak and I wanted to kayak in Bar Harbor, Maine. And my excursion got canceled. And at that point, I was at my very first cruise. So I didn't know all the stuff I know now about cruising. And I thought, well, I guess I can't, they said, well, you can't go now. And I said, well, okay. And she said, well, I guess if you wanted to go, this is where the company is, you can go there. Because I was the only person on the whole cruise ship that wanted to go kayaking. And so I just remember being really determined, like, I'm going to kayak. And so I just marched myself up, a couple blocks from the pier. And I showed up and I paid my money, which was $20 cheaper, by the way, than having to book through the cruise company. And I met this family. There was a family of 3 and they were tandem kayaks. So I ended up, the mother and son were in one kayak and the father was in back of my kayak. He was operating the rudder because I didn't know how to do the rudder. And when we were there, I think this harbor porpoise or something came up right behind us. And it came up and I just heard the splash of it going down. And I just remember turning around and the whole water was like glass for about 15 or 20 feet. And we asked what it was. And the cruise and our guide was, oh, it's probably just a seal. I'm like, yeah, right. Or maybe I can't remember what she said it was, but what the animal she described would be like 2 or 3 feet big. I'm like, no, this thing was much bigger than that. You don't flatten out the water like that if you're only, about a 3 foot maximum, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just got really stubborn and like, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to do. And if you don't want to go, that's fine. You stay home. And I think one of the things that I just I don't know. I know a lot of people that are my age that I've never seen the ocean. I'm like, then you need to. What's stopping you from seeing the ocean?
The ocean is amazing. It calls
It
me all the
is.
time. I
Yes.
love the ocean.
Yeah. I mean, we aren't living in the middle of the country like it's so far away. We can be in the ocean even from here in about 6 hours. Um, how hard is that? You don't even have to stay all day. You don't even have to stay all day. Go for a couple hours and come home. Stay at a Motel 6 in Vermont on your way back, whatever.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
it was your uncle last year when COVID first hit, he had a little bit of a, I won't call it a midlife crisis because he just turned 60 a couple months ago. We won't say any more than that. You'll probably clue into who I'm talking about. But he told me, this is the first time I've ever seen the ocean. I'm like, you're 59, seriously? Yeah,
Wow.
get out there and see it.
That's actually very shocking. But I'm
Yeah.
so happy that he did see the ocean.
Yes,
The ocean's worth it,
it
everyone.
is
If you
definitely
haven't
worth it.
been, go, go, go. Don't be afraid.
No.
You don't have to go in. It's
No.
from a distance. You don't have to go right in there. Um, yes, I love this. Thank you for coming on and sharing a bit of, I guess, a part of who made me. Um, and last week it was Teacher Appreciation Week. So happy Teachers Appreciation Week to you and your
Thank you.
coworkers.
Thank you.
I'm this time, normally I do 3 affirmations, but I'm going to do 3 appreciations for the teachers. So, for those of you that are teachers, this is for you. Special shout out. Um, for those of you that resonate with number 1, your sacrifices don't go unnoticed. Um, for those of you that resonate with number 2, you're making a huge impact on many lives. And then for those of you that resonate with number 3, we wouldn't be where we are without you. And I know that many of us can relate and can think of that one special teacher that really, made their day. And if you would like to, please feel free to comment below when this goes up your favorite teacher and give them an appreciation because
Mhm.
they are a huge part of our lives. So I will start by saying, oh man, there's so many amazing teachers that I had, but I would say a big, huge thank you to Mrs. Tanya Fippen. I
Aw.
would not have done well in math if it wasn't for her extra support and love, and to Jen Smith at the time. Now she's Mrs. Lynch,
Yes, she
because
is.
I was horrible in math, so I send you to mucho love and support. Thank you for being the best teachers. Not the only ones, because there's a lot of them, but math was my not so great um, thing. And oh, and one more, I will say, one of the quotes I'll never forget that I use to this day that I have to give credit to Mrs. Levine, Missy Levine, if you're listening. It was you can bring the horse to the water, you can direct a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink, and that has been ingrained in my mind. So thank
Mhm.
you to all the teachers, but the 3 of you came to mind. So before you go,
Yes.
who will you send your appreciation to?
Oh, goodness. Well, this is kind of, in a way, it's going to sound kind of negative in that the teacher that well, she's just passed away recently, but the teacher that I really have a lot to thank for, at the time, I didn't like it all, because she would sit at her desk, she'd sit on her desk, and she'd have her notebook, and she would dictate to us what we had to write in our notebooks, right down to the point that Roman numeral 1, the Roman Empire, capital A under that, patricians. And so we would have to write down whatever it was. And I just remember being so frustrated and stunted by that. And I would ask her questions, and I'd watch the news and I'd ask her questions, and she would just get frustrated with me because um, I was one of those people that just wanted to know all sorts of things. And she would give me an 85 every week for class participation because I asked too many questions. Not because they were dumb questions. Sometimes I would stump her and I wasn't, and I think that she saw that perhaps in a way as a way of me trying to be a little smarty, like I know more than you. And that wasn't necessarily my intention, although there were a couple times that I knew I stumped her and was like, well, good, because that's for that 85 you gave me. But what she would tell me as she sat on her desk and she'd look down at me because I was in the front row, because she wanted to be in the front row for whatever reason, she'd say, Tracy, history is a cake, and all you get in this class is the cake, but you want the frosting. And I was like, well, no, I said it wrong. She said, all you get in this class is the icing, but you want the cake. And I just remember getting so frustrated with her with that. And because I wanted it all. And so I ended up talking to her afterwards, and I was just really stubborn, as you know, and I would be like, well, I'm going to find out and I'm going to get this. So when I applied for the job that I have now, I told that story. And I said, I've always wanted to go deeper, and, just teaching kids to get them ready for, in New York State, we have the Regents exams, which are these state exams. Just getting kids ready for that, that really wasn't it's not like my calling. I wanted to teach and I wanted to get in depth in things. And so I remember saying in my interview with the deputy superintendent, because it was my second interview, and I said, this is how it was for me growing up and going to school. And I always wanted more. And my teacher knew that. And she'd say, Tracy, history is a cake. And so when the deputy superintendent told me that I got the job, she came down and she sat next to me at my desk because I was teaching just in a different program. And she said, Tracy, you get to have your cake. And so I remember talking to Mrs. Conger, Phyllis Conger, afterwards, because I'd seen her a couple of times. And I did, I did realize when I wasn't 15 anymore and being a snot, what she meant, because she had a job to do and she couldn't get us in depth like I wanted to be. And that was her way of telling me that, she can't do it. It wasn't that she didn't want to. And she said, you were just so smart. She said, and you must have read, I don't know how many newspapers every day, and you knew everything about what was going on, and you just watched the news. And I really didn't. I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would watch the news when I was getting ready to have my breakfast or whatever before school, which, how different is that now?
Yes,
Wake up in the morning.
NPR news.
That's right, I got my NPR. And so that wasn't what was happening. But I think that had she not done that, I think that I don't think that I would have gotten so stubborn about learning and about like, no, I'm going to get my damn cake and I'm going to get it. And so, yeah. So she inspired me, but not by giving me all of these, you can get out there and you can do anything. She inspired me by telling me what I couldn't have. And I was like, oh yeah, well, watch this. And so years later, I'm a teacher and I'm doing my kids are going to eat the damn cake. Some of them don't like the cake, I've got to be honest. Some of them would be much more happier if I was sitting at the end of my desk going, okay, Roman numeral 1.
Hey, that is easier.
It is easier.
Keeps them organized, but that's pretty awesome that you turned that around and you actually got to speak to that teacher later. That's pretty cool to be able to have that conversation. When you're talking about like learning and stuff, it made me think of Belle from Beauty and the Beast.
Yes.
You got those Belle vibes.
Yes, I use Disney too when I'm teaching. Like this week we were talking about vigilantes, and that was a term in our book. And I said, okay, Beauty and the Beast, when the townspeople go try to kill the beast and Gaston is leading, those are vigilantes.
Yes. I love Disney, as you know. So with that being said, thank you for coming on and joining me.
Love you, baby face.
Yes, love you too. Happy Mother's Day. Happy
Thank
Teacher
you, baby.
Oh my gosh. Teachers Appreciation Week. And with that, everyone that's listening and you are loved, you are worthy, you are cherished, and I am proud of you. Until next time on the Pre-Pod. Bye.
Bye.